Hello, everyone, and hello, Miss Reverend Pamela. How are you?
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be with you all.
Thank you. It's truly a pleasure having you. And just so our viewers will notice, we have been playing with the lighting because they will see there's a beautiful blue, gray, and rainbow colored lighting coming across and above. And we've been playing with the settings, so we're just going to leave it like that for now. But it's amazing that we just did a little prayer and we asked the Holy Spirit to come in and the light came in. So I'm going to stick with it, even though it looks kind of weird, but we're going to stick with it because I think it's awesome. So a little bit introduction. I mean, from your bio, I see so many beautiful things. You're a minister of A Course in Miracles. You're a musician. You have a radio show, I'm thinking, in Unity FM about the Course in Miracles. Can you tell us a little bit about all of that?
Well, sure. I did have a radio show for 10 years on Unity. Well, 10 years. It was not all in a line, but it encompassed 10 years of in Kathmandu, Nepal, on the Himalayan Broadcasting Company, in New Jersey on WLFR FM, and on Unity FM online. So that was part of my journey. And right now I do conference calls every morning. I join with people from all over the country in practicing the workbook of the Course in Miracles. And my ministry has changed forms many times. It really began with dedicating my music career to God. And I had a band called World Color, and we were teaching people about the beauty in all different races through music for peace. But like I said, it evolves, it changes form, but it's all the same content of peace.
That's beautiful. And that band, it's not active anymore at all, or you just disintegrated?
No, it was time. I knew when it was time to let it go. We toured for 14 years, and there were musicians from all different countries. So that was really fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So let's kind of take a step back. How did you come into the Course in Miracles? Because I believe it says that you're a student since '89.
Yes. In the late 80s, I was given the book as a gift, and it sat on the shelf collecting dust. And there are people that have had that experience. It's not a unique experience. And I read a book by Eric Butterworth, who was a Unity minister, a very profound Unity minister. And the book was called Discover the Power Within You. And it took me a year to read that book because I was reading from it every day, but I would read a paragraph and it would just blow my mind. I was really absorbing it. And after I finished that book, I tried reading some other spiritual books, and they just seemed very light. And so I prayed and asked for a book that would stretch me. And then all of a sudden, the Course in Miracles was on a chair in my bedroom. And for years, it had been in a bookshelf in the front of my house. Now, I don't know how it got there. I don't know what the Holy Spirit used to move the book, but I saw it there, I picked it up, and I started flipping through it, and I went, this is the answer to my prayer. And all of our prayers are answered. That's what it says in A Course in Miracles, and love answers every call. And so I recognized it as this is it, this is the book. And so I started studying it, and I gave a try to the workbook in the beginning. Now, I quit the work. I was a workbook dropout. Now today I'm facilitating these daily workbook calls, but I was a workbook dropout. And at the time I was bi-coastal because I had the band in Los Angeles and I played in an orchestra on the East Coast. And I was so fortunate because Marianne Williamson was lecturing every week in LA. And so it really helped me to have that input of someone really explaining so clearly in terms that I could understand and how to apply it. But I remember one day I was crying at the tape sale. It was cassette tapes at the time. I was crying at the tape sale desk to the lady there about something that seemed very important to me at the time, but I can't even remember what the problem was that I thought I was having. And the lady said, it was like she was psychic or something. She said, "Are you doing the workbook?" And I said, "No, it's too hard." So she said, "Well, today's the 27th of the month. Start with lesson 27." And so I did. I dropped back into the workbook, and I was so grateful to that woman.
Yeah.
And later that year, a friend of mine who had been doing the course for longer than I had said, "Well, this year I'm just doing the first 50 lessons and then repeating them." And I went, "Ew," in my big wisdom, "Ew, why would you want to do the first 50 lessons and repeat them?" And he said, "Because the early part of the workbook is undoing the ego thought system, and the later part of the workbook brings in those thoughts of love." And I went, that lady was very smart, because she just got me to buy in a little bit further along into the workbook. And so the interesting thing is that I now recognize that those lessons that I had resistance to earlier in my relationship with the course, it wasn't the Christ mind saying, "Don't do those lessons," or concepts in the text. It was the ego saying, "Don't do that because I'm about to get undone."
Right. Right.
So I found that the parts that in the beginning, that I resisted the most, they have become the greatest keys for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Hon, I
Yeah.
don't want to interrupt you. Let's move the camera slightly because it's,
Okay. The sun is moving.
yeah, I can tell because it's getting a little bit more.
What if I move it back
There
here?
we go. Perfect. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so we had our fun with the lighting.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's funny because I'm not going to get into my version of it yet, but the Course in Miracles sat on my bookshelf. And what I did is I did a 3-year complementary and alternative medicine program. And that was a required reading. And the program itself was 3 years long. I didn't touch the book until like the 4th year. I was like, no. I was, first of all, I was like, what is it even saying? Like, I know it's English, but I'm not even comprehending. And it's funny that I have never met Marianne Williamson in person, but through her book, I went to the Return to Love.
Yes.
I think I read it in a day and a half, and it clicked. Then I went back to the book and I said, okay, and I understood it better. I'm not gonna lie, I still haven't completed the whole book or the lessons or the text. It's like, and it's what you just said, there's some lessons that are easier, or at least I get them easier, and it feels right.
Yes.
You can feel it in your soul that you're comprehending and you're not just reading it like a novel.
Yes.
And there are other lessons that I'm stuck at a paragraph. It's like I can't go further because I'm like, and I keep repeating it and repeating it. And I'm like, what is this? I don't get it. And I can be there weeks. So it's kind of, it's that's why I wanted to talk with you guys, because it's kind of it's an individual process, obviously, but not everybody gets it from the get-go.
Well, if we got it from the get-go, we wouldn't need to do it. That's the thing.
Right.
That's why it's a course. And early in my path, I used to do that. I would flunk myself out from a workbook, and I'd keep trying to make myself understand it by doing it over and over again. But the interesting thing is, if you notice in the introduction to the workbook, he says you don't have to like it, you don't have to understand it. Some of these lessons you will actively resist. Just do it and apply it to everything. And by that application, then you'll find the results. Then you'll find the fruit. So your understanding of it has really no bearing on whether it works or not. So if you just do one lesson a day and just accept it, you don't have to intellectually understand it. And he tells, it's so interesting because he gives you very explicit instructions. And those early lessons that are the ego undoing lessons, they're real short too. I mean, that's really.
So, okay. I'm going to cut the break here for a minute. I'm going to pause the recording. I just noticed my computer's dying and I don't know why. Let me run and get the cable. Sorry. I'll cut this part out. Hold on. Okay, so while I'm connecting, I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't know if you can tell, obviously my hair is blonde.
No, I can see that.
I'll show you in a bit. It's a little bit lighter. So I used to be a brunette for over 13 years. Okay, there we go. I used to be a brunette for over 13 years, and see, it's a lot lighter now.
Yeah.
Black. I've been black for 10 more, like 13, 14 years. So not only am I coming out in camera now, but I'm coming out a totally different person. It's like, who is this person? But okay. All right, sorry. So we're back. No, and it's amazing. I mean, the ego, we're so used to it that we don't recognize it. And I think part of the course, at least from my understanding of it, part of the course is really for you to separate what is ego. And there's a lot of lessons, like you just said. There's some of them are related to the ego. Some of them are a little bit easier. What course, or what, not course, what lesson do you find the most appealing to you, or at least one that you would want to talk about with us right now? Because so many of them, I mean, there's obviously 365 of them.
Right.
There's so many of them. I think there's always one that always clicks with us, either at a particular moment in our life or something that we say we want to teach on. What would that be for you?
Okay, well, my favorite lesson used to be the peace of God is shining in me now, because who wouldn't want to meditate on that? Mm-hmm. But right now, I've been noticing, because it's been very important to me this year, the rules for decision, which is actually not, it's from the text.
Okay.
And the rules for decision is talking about how every morning when we wake up in the morning, to immediately remember what kind of day we want to have. Mm-hmm. And that when we want to have and so for me, I want to have a happy day, I want to have a peaceful day, I want to have a joyful day. And he tells us that we can have that day if we let the Holy Spirit make all of our decisions for us.
Right.
And he reminds us in this section that we're always making decisions, and we might not even recognize that we're making decisions. But we're always making decisions under the guidance of the Holy Spirit or the ego. So to consciously decide in the morning, look, if I want to be happy, if I want to be peaceful, if I want to be joyful, I'm going to let the Holy Spirit be my guide. And really, all throughout the course, in so many different places, he's reminding us, turn to the Holy Spirit. Turn to the Holy Spirit, turn to the Holy Spirit. Because if we're not consciously, the Holy Spirit needs our willingness. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, God could just go like, I'm enlightening all of you right now, you know, but
easier.
But our willingness is necessary. Right. So we're giving that willingness in the morning and saying, here's why I'm willing to turn to the Holy Spirit, because I want to be happy, peaceful, and joyful. That's God's will for me. So I'm going to let the Holy Spirit be my guide, and I'm not going to go out and make these plans of what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the Holy Spirit remind me of what I really want. Mm-hmm. So there's other parts, you know, in lesson 135, which is kind of a famous Course in Miracles lesson. There's a whole lot in there, but it reminds us that everything has been perfectly planned for us. So if I'm not running out there making my own plan, but if I'm listening for what's that divine plan for me, mm-hmm. then I'm going to have that peace. I can have a peaceful, loving, joyful day if I'm listening to the Holy Spirit, if I'm listening to that voice for God, that spirit of peace. There's so many different names for the Holy Spirit in the Course. The spirit of peace, the spirit of love, the spirit of joy. If I'm letting the spirit of peace make my decisions, then I'm going to have peace. If I'm listening to the spirit of joy make my decisions. So then also throughout the day, that I'm going through this day being led by the higher mind, then when I get into the situations into which I've been led, then to not judge or condemn the situation itself, because that is also a decision. It's a decision to listen to the ego, because there's no condemnation in God. So I'm letting the Holy Spirit interpret everything. And so, for example, I was led to talk about decisions today. I was hearing in a lot of different places, it kept coming up, difficult decision, difficult decision, difficult decision. I went, wait a second, there are no difficult decisions. That's what A Course in Miracles says, that there are no difficult decisions. Because when I'm letting the Holy Spirit guide my decisions, that's the only decision I have to make. I make it in the morning. I make the decision that I want the Holy Spirit to guide my decisions, and that means I only want God's will, and that means I only want happiness, peace, and love. That takes away that illusion that I have to make some hard decision. Because if I'm making some hard decision, some difficult decision, it means I'm trying to make a decision without God, without that voice for God, without the divine. That's a belief that I'm alone, all alone in the universe, and I'm in charge of everything. So there really are no difficult decisions. Then there's a lesson that talks about how every decision is a decision between a grievance and a miracle. So I'm either deciding to let the ego tell me what to do and how everything is, or I am letting the Holy Spirit interpret. So the ego is going to be like grievance, and the Holy Spirit is going to be like miracle.
Right.
And we're
so in those terms, so let's take a step back for a minute. So
okay.
In those terms, one, for the people listening, and even for myself, when we do get stuck in our mind, which is called the ego mind, when we do get stuck in our mind and we do consider this a difficult decision or a difficult situation we're in, from that to handing over to the Holy Spirit and asking God, this is what I want, this is the choice, you deal with it. How do we get from there to there if we're not there yet?
Okay, so there's something also in the rules for decision that we can go, I recognize I don't like the way I feel.
Okay.
That's huge.
Right. Okay.
I recognize I don't like the way I feel. Therefore, that's not the Holy Spirit. It's just like with the lessons. If I'm feeling resistance and I'm not feeling happiness, that's the ego.
Yeah.
There's no upside to listening to the ego. There really isn't, because it's gonna bring this feeling of pain and discomfort. And the Course says that now this is a big statement, every form of distress is some form of unforgiveness. So unforgiveness, there's no benefits. There's just no benefit.
Here goes the list.
There's just no benefit.
Yeah.
There's just I'm not getting my way, and therefore I'm going to make myself unhappy. And then when we go, all right, you know what? I'd rather be happy. And so the interesting thing is that we recognize, okay, this situation is not serving my ego, and therefore my ego is having a tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to live as my higher self. Don't you want to live as your higher self?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say I was in a situation recently. My orchestra job is appearing to change, and I was reactive. I felt pain, and then I went, wait a second. This situation is this is not the Christ in me. This is not the Christ in me. This is the ego. The ego is reacting. And I went, wait a second. This situation isn't serving the ego. That must mean it's serving the Christ in me. I'm so happy. I switched them because I realized I want my life to be in the service of Christ, because that's what I am. So once you start seeing the ego, then the ego is so busted, because I don't want to go through my life identifying with the ego. Mm-hmm. So when you recognize it's not serving the ego, that's because it's serving Christ.
Right.
And it just dissolved.
And well, two things, and that's what they call a miracle, the shift in perspective.
Exactly.
That's so, which is leading to what I was going to say. For the people who haven't started A Course in Miracles or are like I did, that we also had it on the bookshelf for many, many years. That's the point of the whole course. It's teaching us to realize what we're identifying with, what they
Right.
consider the ego. It's breaking us away from that construct of thinking that we've had for so long that we don't even recognize it. And just like you said, it's the feeling of it. If
Mm.
I feel this is like annoying or going crazy, or why am I feeling like this, the course teaches us ways for us to recognize, well, this isn't normal, first of all. Second, I don't want to feel like this. Third, we could call that the ego thinking and realize we don't want that. But it also teaches us, okay, what and who can we go to, which then leads to the Holy Spirit, correct?
Yes. Who are you going to call? The Holy Spirit.
Okay. And then from your eyes, what is the Holy Spirit? I've heard different ways of people explaining it.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit. Well, it is the spirit of love. It is the spirit of joy. It is the spirit of peace. It's the teacher. It's the teacher. You know, the Course in Miracles is a course, and it comes with a teacher. And that is that inner teacher. It's inside us. It's not outside. And it's that divine presence. And I like to think of it, it's so simple. It's a spirit, and it's also holy.
All right, next.
And you know, the course tells us to listen for the Holy Spirit in your brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's not a gender issue, so we can hear that guidance from listening. And someone can be talking about something that doesn't appear to have anything to do with the question that we're asking for guidance for, but it's like a highlighter will be taken on the conversation, and we'll get the answer that we're listening for.
Mm-hmm.
Or we might pass a billboard, or we'll hear song lyrics.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit's always communicating with us. It's like there's a radio that's broadcasting all the time. Every answer we need is there for us. But when we're willing to tune in, then we can hear it in direct proportion to our willingness to hear it, and not to be like, help me get my way in the world, but I'm willing to have that happiness, that peace, and that love. And then we're liberated from our belief that it actually comes from the world. This course brings us unconditional happiness, love, and peace. And when I first started the course, I was like, well, that stinks. I want me some outer, you know, because it's the ego. It's like, well, it must be coming from the world. But Jesus overcame the world.
Right. And I think many of us think that way because we weren't taught to think separate. And I think that's part of at least in my opinion, that's part of many of the things that I look into and I study and I read. In the magazine, I talk about a lot of different topics, a lot of different themes. And from every different version of learning something, if you really trace it back, it goes back to that. It goes back to learning to undo that conditional society way that we were brought up. Because for thousands and thousands of years, whatever the case may be, we were never taught to really consider asking a higher spirit without the religion, without the dogma, without certain practices, just to really look within. We're always taught to seek something from the outside. And I think that's a lot of what the ego does. And that's, at least in my opinion, that's what happened. That I was like, well, if I'm taught to, I can make it on my own and I empower women through this magazine and I do this and I do that. It takes humility in the sense to be at a place of peace, to know that you can step back and say, it's something going through me, it's not me. And I think that's what the Course in Miracles taught me, although what we were talking about, the ego is just, it has its field day.
You know what's so interesting is I like to remember that because the article that I wrote is about accepting atonement, is that it's all, this atonement opportunity has always been there. And so the world has always been showing me what I was believing and giving me the opportunity to give that over to the Holy Spirit to be undone.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
So just in the awareness in this moment, I can give that up and see, the Course says we owe such a debt of gratitude to our brothers, because if someone's showing me something that isn't love, happiness, or peace, or then I can recognize, wow, they're just showing me something that was subconscious in my mind. And that's giving me the opportunity to give that over. Oh, and then I become so grateful.
And it's learning to see that and recognize that, and then be willing to say, okay, help me with this. And not have to go, great, now I have to fix this too, which is the difference.
Right. It's the Holy Spirit's the purifier.
Right.
So it's so interesting about forgiveness in the Course. It's something that Holy Spirit actually does by our willingness to give our untrue thoughts to the Holy Spirit to be undone. Because we could try to forgive. We can't. If we're believing, if we have our unforgiving thoughts, the level of the mind that has the unforgiveness isn't the level of the mind that does the forgiving. The Holy Spirit is actually the forgiver. So our part is just to be willing to give those thoughts over to be undone. Our part's actually pretty small, but it's really important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a step back before we close up. For somebody that's beginning the Course in Miracles, what do you recommend them to do when they begin?
Could we stop the recording for a second?
Yeah.
I just have to blow my nose, and I think it would be kind of unsightly.
Yes. So what would you recommend for somebody that's just starting?
Okay. So just like in the rules for decision, asking the Holy Spirit to interpret everything, every time I pick up the book, I ask the Holy Spirit to interpret the Course for me, to interpret what I'm going to read. And that has really helped me a lot, because before I did that, the ego is like, I'll tell you what this means.
Been there too.
And because the Holy Spirit's the teacher, it really saves a lot of time.
Oh.
Yeah. And before I started doing that, early in my relationship with the Course, I was triggered by the male language because I was putting the ego's meaning onto it. And so I had a grievance, and I was putting the grievance meaning on it. And so I went in there and was like changing all the male language to female pronouns. And so I did that for a while. And then because of doing the Course, then was undoing ego. And then I realized that it was just the ego's way of distracting me from the content. So if words come up in the Course that are a trigger, I suggest instead of changing the form of the Course to make the ego more comfortable, leave the form alone and ask whatever's coming up, recognize it's an opportunity to forgive.
Okay. Great. Beautiful. Well, darling, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks for having me.
I enjoyed the playful setting of the lighting at the beginning. If people want to learn more and connect with you or listen to what you offer in the mornings, those calls, what is a good way to reach out to you?
Well, I have a website. It's PamelaWhitman.com.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the bio as well.
Great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very, 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 very much. I loved really speaking to you. And I'm actually going to take a few of those pointers. I had never thought of asking the Holy Spirit to help me understand this before reading it. I would kind of do it after my mind went, what was this? Did I just reread this paragraph for the 5th time and not get it? But I think asking ahead of time, I had never tried that. So there we go.
Oh, so much love to you, dear.
Thank you. The same. Bye.